This is the first photograph I ever shot on film. This was back in November 2020, 2 years ago, when I asked my dad whether his Pentax K1000, which I found, still works, and he didn't really have a clue if it still worked, but he was rather confident that it should be fine, basically saying he wouldn't know why it wouldn't. And so I tried it out, and that was the beginning of a new path in photography that I've been discovering for the past 2 years. Ever since that first roll, I haven't been able to stop shooting film. It's just wonderful, so much fun. And so in what felt like no time, a year had passed, and I made a video in which I reflected on the journey so far, showing you some favourites of the year. And well, since then, another year has passed. We've even entered December now, and so I thought, let's keep this yearly retrospection going and look back at the film photography from my second year of shooting film. I've gathered a bunch of photos that, as a series, show the progression of this past year. These are not all in particular my favourites of the year, but usually my favourites of each roll. Even just collecting these photos for the video has already felt like a good view into the past 12 months and what I've been up to. And now I really look forward to sharing this with you in this video, so make yourself comfortable and let's wind back time to December 2021 when my second year of shooting film began. So I've laid the photographs out in mostly pairs, sometimes in threes, and occasionally singled out depending on what format was fitting. Here are two shots from sometime in December 2021 when one morning I was exploring the countryside just outside of town, where twice I spotted a power pole that could act as the subject. The two have pretty different vibes, but I think both turned out so beautifully, so I wanted to include them in the video. By now, a year after my first roll of film, I had seemed to have gotten a good grasp of the medium and was getting more and more consistent with my results. Next, I have two black and white photographs, also from December, which I enjoy a lot. The left one is a view from the back seat of my girlfriend's car when we were driving to her best friend's place to celebrate New Year's Eve. I just love the authentic view in the picture and the motion captured. The second shot I just love for, well, obvious reasons. I mean, Emily the cat is just hilarious at times. Then, here are two shots from sometime around December and January. I'm not quite sure. The first shot you might remember if you saw that episode of Photography Behind the Scenes. I documented the whole morning. Still, a year later, I am in awe with the photographs I was able to capture that morning. The snow and the morning sun were such beautiful conditions to shoot in. The second shot is a bit more casual, it's just a photo of someone's house and garden, but while I was shooting there, I walked by that house and I loved how that light was hitting the wall, and so I framed up this shot and I still really like the outcome. The next two shots must have also been sometime in January or maybe already February when we had some really cold days. The first shot is a photograph of this snow-covered path and the building. I like this scene for the lighting, which looks quite cool, to put it simply. The right shot was from a surprisingly foggy day when I explored some fields which happened to be along the path of the trains, and so I got a couple shots of the passing trains, which I found out are pretty fun subjects. Then here are another two black and white shots from a day in spring when I checked out a pond not far from home. This forest, and especially the pond, were such a tranquil environment that I was able to get some photographs which attempt to evoke a similar calmness when viewed. Next up, I want to show you 6 pictures from a big event that happened this year. If you were following the channel at that time, you might already know what I'm talking about. Back in April, my dad took me, my brother and sister and my girlfriend on a trip to Botswana in southern Africa, where we rented an off-road car with tents to explore the nature and wildlife of Botswana. Of course, I had a couple rolls of film with me, and these are some of my favourite shots from the trip. The first is a photo of some clouds I spotted as we were approaching Johannesburg from where we would continue to Botswana. I love to shoot clouds because they are such beautiful and fascinating things of nature, and these in particular caught me, so I had to get this shot. The second photograph is this one, which was, by the way, shot on my first ever roll of Kodak Ektar 100. I didn't fall in love with the film stock, but this photo does make me want to shoot it again. These colours are so good. The simple composition and the rather simple colour contrast make such a pleasing image overall. I love that the clouds in the sky are filling up that negative space, and the motion in the foreground adds another intriguing element which I find increases the immersion of this photograph. Next I have two shots from a sunset we watched from this bridge, where I got this nice portrait of my dad gazing into the distance in this soft red light. The second shot is a detail of the river where we were standing above on the bridge. I really liked the grass that popped out of the water and how the sunset's light reflected in the water. Lastly, here are two more simple, yet for me memorable shots. These weren't supposed to be photographs for the sake of capturing something beautiful, creative, or interesting. I simply got these for documentary purposes. The first shot shows one of our camps, and the right one I got to show the amount of dirt the car had collected on the trip. Then let's continue with this pair, which is from an afternoon when I was actually just testing out a camera. I had bought an old camera, in fact the oldest one I have I think, and I had to shoot a roll of film through it to find out whether it was actually working. And so I'm very glad that the camera turned out to be working just fine, because otherwise I would have missed these shots. The left one I love for how wide it is. I don't remember exactly what my position was, but this perspective from slightly above gives such a nice view, even though I was shooting with a 50mm lens. And the second photo is a simple silhouette shot of a friend of mine, which I like for the colours and just the vibes that the photo emits. Then I have another 3 shots which also stem from this old camera. These are again photographs you might remember from the behind the scenes episode I made in which I showed the process of getting these. I really like how they look and felt that they were worthy of being included in this video, so here they are. Then, by now, we are in the middle of summer when one day I decided to drive out to the mountains and find some nice forests to photograph, and as you can see, my search was a success. I found this beautiful place where I shot some wider shots but also some details of things that intrigued me. I remember having a lot of fun with the lighting on that day that came through the trees and leaves and got scattered around in the forest, enabling shots like this one which show just a sliver of light. Next I want to show you 2 portraits I got on some lesser sunny days. In both cases, I tried to shoot a full-body portrait with a 135mm lens, which I find has a great look when used like this. The first shot worked out alright. I slightly missed focus, but still find that the portrait is fine. The second shot I also like a lot, mainly thanks to my friend's popping orange look and his umbrella, which turned out to be a great prop. The next 3 photos here were all from that day with my friend Jan. It's a day I didn't document for the channel. I was just out with him on this rainy day to shoot some photos together, and a few of these really turned out quite nicely. The first is an attempt to try a Todd Hido style blurry landscape. The second one is a photograph picturing some details of Jan's jacket and umbrella. I really like this one for its colours and how the composition flows. And lastly, this one is a wide shot with Jan as a small subject for the sense of space on this mountain, which worked out wonderfully. Then, here are 3 black-white photographs which I shot on a roll of film that I took maybe 2 months or so to shoot, so the dates are a bit mixed up and I'm not quite sure when these were taken, but these are all 3 photos from this year which I like a lot. The first I like for the dramatic atmosphere created by the dark water that is visibly ripped in little waves by the windy weather conditions. The second shot shows the same scene but from my perspective inside the safety of a car, which suddenly gives the photo an entirely different feeling. And the third shot is actually not related to this day. This is a picture of a room at my parents' place which I think has such good lighting, and I love how the photograph holds many implications which mirror my parents' personalities. Next I want to show you a photograph that I actually didn't take. In fact, it was taken before I was born. This one. If you saw the video I made a couple months ago about this photo, you will remember that I had taken a bunch of negatives from my parents and scanned them, and this here is one of my favourite scans from that bunch. The picture was probably taken by my mum, but I'm not sure. Even though I was not the photographer, I feel that this is part of my analog photography journey over this year. It marks a time when I had gained enough confidence in my scanning that I believed I could give these nearly forgotten photographs a new life. Then, continuing through summer, here are 2 shots from Vienna before Millie and I moved here when we just came to see a concert. Both are similar shots in the way that they simply look down a road and capture this depth of the location, which, as you probably know, is something I love to do. It's simple, yet so good. I love how the exposure in the first picture seemed to be just right so that the shadows and highlights are pretty balanced. And I adore the dramatic, filmic look of the second shot. Lights like these that go in a straight line in a tunnel like here always somehow intrigue me. Then, next up are 2 photos from a wonderful evening photography session back in August when Melly and I visited a mountain not far from home to have a picnic and watch the sunset. I had a point-and-shoot camera with me to shoot some Lama 800, and here are 2 of the shots from that evening which I think came out so cool. The first one is this classic mountain landscape shot with the trees in the foreground. I love how balanced the composition feels in this one. The second photo is obviously another one I actually didn't take myself. I had set everything up and then asked Melly to shoot. I love this mixed light with the flash and the sunset gradient in the sky. Now, we're coming to a couple photos which I feel like I only just talked about, but it's already been a couple months. Sometime in August, I was helping out a couple friends with their music video shoot, and it was on that trip that I got some absolutely amazing photos of a sunrise. To my surprise, there was a little bit of morning mist, and the first shot shows that quite clearly, whereas the second one has it a bit more scattered so that the overall atmosphere in the air was magical once the sunlight hit the landscape. This photograph is definitely very high on my list of favourite photos of this year. Then here's one more shot from the end of that day, this time at sunset. I just love the contrast between the nature and the super unnatural white plastic chair that looks so lost in the scene. It makes for an interesting subject and dynamic between the subject and environment, I find. Many from the Patreon community will have seen this one just recently because this was the photo I chose to print on the October postcard. Shameless plug here. If you're interested in Lightroom presets, extra videos or postcards like this one, you can check out my Patreon via the link in the description. Next up, we're coming all the more closer to the present. Here is a photo I shot in the underground of Berlin. You might remember it from a video I posted in September in which I showed you this photograph. I was so intrigued by the architecture here with the lights and the slightly shiny look of the hall. But even now, after 2 years of shooting, I still keep forgetting to set the focus on my Olympus XA3. Then let's continue with these photographs. My second year of shooting film was also blessed with some first attempts of shooting film stocks that I hadn't tried yet. These are all photos from my first ever roll of Portra 800, which, maybe you remember the video, didn't go quite right because I got a bunch of light leaks. At first I was really upset, however after giving it some time, letting go of my initial expectations and accepting the light leaks, I've come to love some photographs from that roll nevertheless. The flower covered in this teal coloured light leak is pretty cool actually. The second shot didn't get too much leakage, so it's just cropped slightly, and I love it. The vibe of the kitchen covered in the textured warm sunlight is beautiful. And then the third shot is another one at home. This photo marks the time of Melly and me moving to Vienna, as can be seen here thanks to the boxes and the plant that is randomly placed there. And then there is one more shot from that roll which I love so much, and I also see really high up on my list of favourites from this year, and that is this shot. It's a classic portrait/landscape kind of shot, the type I do all the time, and this particular one worked out so nicely. The grass hill, the landscape, the light, everything here fits together so well and creates this harmony. And that brings us to the present. Here are 2 photos I only just showed you a couple weeks ago. I knew that I would include a couple of these recent photos because they too definitely count to some of my favourites from the year. The conditions I was able to shoot in recently were such a blessing. Here are 2 more from that moody day when I was exploring a mountain and its forest. And lastly, I want to include 3 photographs from my trip to Paris in October. I documented that trip with a black and white film, and I got some results I'm so happy with. Especially this shot of a woman with her dog. It's not really anything special at first sight, I think, but it is to me because it's street photography, a genre I rarely practice, and so getting this feels like a neat little accomplishment to me. Anyway, that is the end of this throwback of the past 12 months, my second year of film photography. I'm still loving it as much as ever, and I hope that my journey with this medium continues for another great third year. If so, I'm pretty sure I'll be making another one of these videos, and of course I hope that you too will be around again. That's it for this week. If you enjoyed it, I'd appreciate a like on the video, consider subscribing if you haven't yet, and I'll see you again next week. Until then, goodbye.